Aquaba, welcome back. If you are just joining us, we are exploring the research, thoughts, and visionary deeds of some of our esteemed scholar activists who have extended the path for all of us. One of the most influential African scholars of the 20th century that many people are not familiar with is Dr. Cheik Anta Diop. A Senegalese scholar born in 1923, Diop was a Renaissance man, having brilliantly mastered several fields of study. Diop was a distinguished historian, anthropologist, nuclear physicist, and Pan-African political leader. Educated in both Islamic and European colonial schools, Diop earned his bachelor's degree in Senegal and moved to France for graduate studies at the Sorbonne at the University of Paris in 1946. He immediately became involved with the anti-colonial student movement, engaging with young African intellectuals who were actively strategizing to break the yoke of colonialism in their various African countries. Diop helped organize the first Pan-African Student Congress in 1951 and was a participant in the first World Congress of Black Writers and Artists in 1956. His first doctoral dissertation attempt concerning the Black African identity of the ancient Egyptians was submitted and rejected by the Sorbonne in 1951. French publishing company African Presence saw its truth and value and published it as a book in 1951. The book was entitled Negro Nations and Culture and gave Diop international acclaim and made him the most controversial historian of his time. 2 more attempts to obtain the doctorate were made and rejected. Finally, he amassed an array of historians, sociologists, and anthropologists on his doctoral committee and successfully defended his dissertation. It was a hard-won, decade-long battle, but he was finally awarded the doctorate in 1960, the year of Senegalese independence. He returned home and began to use his considerable gifts to shift consciousness and rewrite the history of the continent. Diop's second book became the foundation for his political work. Black Africa, the economic and cultural basis for a federated state, argued for a culturally and economically unified Africa. I must quote his powerful and succinct vision of the continent, simply to become the power in the world that she should rightfully be, end quote. When Diop organized and founded the political party, the Bloc of the Masses of the Senegalese, he was instantly considered a threat to Senegal's first president, Leopold Senghor. Diop was promptly arrested, tortured, and his political party banned. Diop's supporters were a force. They mounted an intense campaign for his release. With escalating pressure, Senghor relented and released him from prison, but then tried to co-opt him with a position in the government. Diop refused. After a decade of active political life, Diop abandoned politics. Senghor had succeeded in establishing the Senegalese government as a neo-colonial accessory to their former colonial masters. He proudly promoted and often proclaimed the Frenchness of Senegal. Refocusing on his research work, Diop became a pioneer of the process of radiocarbon dating, a scientific technique for measuring the age of organic remains. It is most commonly used to determine the age of wooden archaeological artifacts or ancient human remains. Applying this scientific method to Egyptian mummies, Diop was able to definitively prove his thesis that the ancient Egyptians were indeed Black African, an unwelcome seismic shift for the European intelligentsia. Of course, one wonders why the name the ancient Egyptians gave to themselves, Kemet, meaning land of the blacks or black land, was summarily ignored by European scholars. But then again, it's very difficult to justify enslaving a people who built the pyramids. Diop's studies into the origin of man led him to contemplate and develop a theory regarding the origins of diverse racial identities and personalities. The two-cradle theory, in a nutshell, is an explanation for the development of human beings physically and psychically. Starting with the fact that humanity began in Africa, this theory postulates that the severe climate of Europe and Asia resulted in biological and cultural changes in the original human, including loss of melanin and becoming prone to individualistic, aggressive, nomadic, and xenophobic personality characteristics. This contrasts with warmer and more hospitable climes found in Africa, where resources were naturally plentiful, resulting in a cooperative, generally peaceful, and more sedentary human personality. According to the two-cradle theory, climate indelibly marked instincts, habits, behaviors, and ethical considerations of the people shaped within the two distinct cradles or frameworks that still influences the actions of humans today. Of course, Eurocentric academicians vehemently disagree with this assessment of the development of the human personality. But it seems to be common sense that if you must fight to eat, your perspective is very different from the person who reaches up to a tree and sweet fruit is readily available. But I'll leave that alone. Diop is the author of a number of important scholarly books. African Origins, Myth or Reality in particular is required reading in the field of Africology. But one of his most important and enduring contributions concerns the proper writing of global African history. Dr. Diop was a member and major contributor to the UNESCO International Scientific Committee for drafting a general history of Africa for the United Nations in 1971. In crafting the opening chapter, Diop presented anthropological and historical evidence to prove that not only were the ancient Egyptians Black, but they also had a close genetic affinity with West African ethnic groups physically and culturally. His presentation was collaborated with scientific analysis of melanin levels, comparisons of cultural practices, and primary accounts of ancient Greek historians. With intellectual insight, academic expertise, and scientific genius, Dr. Cheik Anta Diop was a spark of fire that forever changed the trajectory of how African history is recorded. This is why he is the father of African-centered thought, and his alma mater, the University of Dakar, was renamed Cheik Anta Diop University in 1987. Dr. Diop personally transitioned to the land of ancestors in 1986, his incredible legacy assured. Extending the work of Dr. Cheik Anta Diop is the work of scholar activist Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, a globally recognized historian, literary critic, linguist, and anthropologist. Dr. Ivan Van Sertima was born in Kitty Village, Guyana in 1935 and was educated at the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London and Rutgers University Graduate School in New Jersey. Like Marcus Garvey, he worked with our people globally, recruiting various scholars to write in their area of expertise. And like Diop, presented his extensive research before a number of international institutions with the intention to rewrite and correct the historical record of African people. Van Sertima's genius was acknowledged internationally. His accomplishments include the Swedish Academy requesting his services as nominator for candidates for the Nobel Prize in Literature from 1976 to 1980. He served on UNESCO's International Commission for Rewriting the Scientific and Cultural History of Mankind, and he testified before the U.S. Congress challenging the American discovery myth of Christopher Columbus in 1987. In 1979, Van Sertima founded the Journal of African Civilizations and was the editor of what has become a leading anthropological journal dedicated to researching and sharing accurate information about Africa's ancient civilizations. In addition to the numerous scholarly works he wrote or books he edited, he is the author of They Came Before Columbus, the African Presence in Ancient America. First published in 1976, it is an international, award-winning bestseller and is currently in its 29th printing. Dr. Van Sertima retired in 2006 and entered the ancestral realm in 2009. We'll be right back.